Today we're gonna figure out if the earliest water-cooled 911 is the right sports car for you. So this is part 3 of what was originally an 8-part series. We're going to shorten that down of the pros and cons of various cars that I plan on buying before I bought the car behind me, which is the cheapest Porsche 911 Carrera Coupe with under 100,000 miles and a clean title in the United States. Now, if you'd like to see more about that, I'll put a link up here. So my first video was of the pros and cons of owning a 987 Porsche Cayman S. I had divided the pros into one video and the cons into the other video, and I thought, you know, that's going to take everyone way too long to have to watch their 8 videos, and you know, why do that to you? So hopefully you enjoy it better to have the pros and cons all in one, and actually I'm going to do cons and pros because it'd be nice to end on an optimistic note instead of, you know, the cons. So if you're new to the channel and you haven't already, you might want to subscribe. That way you don't miss the rest of the pros and cons. The cars I was thinking about buying were a 987 Cayman S, and then a Porsche 996, an early 996 like the one behind me, which I ended up buying. The next 2 videos in the series will be of the 996 Carrera 4S and then of the 997.1, and we'll also cover a little bit of the .2, although the .1 was probably more what I was thinking of buying just based on my price range. With all that out of the way, there's only a couple more things that, you know, it's only take a half an hour to start the video. Now, before I get started on this, I just want to say that I'm not an automotive expert. I only play one on YouTube. Now that our lawyers are happy, we can get on with this video. So there are 3 cons of buying an early Porsche 996 generation 911. Con number 1, the lack of cup holders. It's something that Porsche fought for a very long time. I mean, why would you want to have a drink in your car? No way you're going to get thirsty, right? And if you do need to carry a drink in your car, that's why you have a passenger seat. You just need to have someone that wants to come there and hold your drink, and theirs as well, probably. So it's still part of a time frame where they fought and fought even the idea of having a cup holder. The earliest cars do not usually have a cup holder. There were either aftermarket or Porsche add-ons that you could put in that added a cup holder. In 2000, 2001, some of those cars do have little push button cup holders. They're not very good. They are really bad, actually. But over time, Porsche has made very nice cup holders that hide out of the way so they don't ruin the design of the interior, but are very functional. However, in the early 996, you don't get it. So if you need to go through a drive-through and you're ordering 2 drinks, you know, most of the time they don't give you a drink carrier if you only order 2 drinks. So you have to ask, hey, could I have a drink carrier so that way you can have your drink? Even if you're just driving to go home to drink the drink, you need something to hold your cup in. For long trips, a water bottle is great because then you can just throw that anywhere. You don't necessarily have to have a cup holder for anything that's in a bottle. Alternatively, there are plenty of aftermarket cup holders that you can get. And like I said, Porsche actually did have little cup holders that hook into the air vents. The funny thing about that is they block the air vents when they're in there. So I guess it keeps your drink cool if you have your air conditioner on, but it doesn't keep you cool. So if you have an early 996, you just have to work around not having cup holders, whether you buy an aftermarket replacement to add cup holders or you just decide, hey, I'm not going to have them and let's figure this out how I have to carry them places. So here's con number 2, the headlights. There are a lot of people that just hate the 996 headlights. The early 996 headlights are almost identical to the Porsche Boxster. 986 Boxster had the what they call fried egg headlights because there's yellow on the bottom and white on the top, and it kind of looks a little bit like fried eggs. So 911 purists really hate the fact that the front end in general of the early 996 looks almost exactly like a 986 Boxster. I personally don't care, and this one has the updated headlights, so they got rid of the ambers, but whether or not you have the ambers, I had that in my 986 Boxster and I was fine with it. I thought it looked good, but you know, to each their own. But the one thing a lot of people forget is there is a car that is extremely desirable. It's worth millions of dollars. It's a Porsche 911 GT1. GT1, so Le Mans winning sports car. And a mid-engine 911 actually. But there were a few road-going versions. I believe it's something like 25 of them made. And while some of them did have the 993 front headlights, those are extremely rare. Only a few of those exist. And those are extremely valuable because of that. Not that all 911 GT1s aren't extremely valuable, but the regular 911 GT1 had the same headlights as are in the 996 generation 911. So yes, it did have a similar look to the Boxster, but it also has the same headlights as a freaking Le Mans winning supercar. And here's con number 3, the plastic in the interior. There's a lot of plastic in the interior in the 996 and the entire generation. Now you can get full leather interior, but not all 911s have them. The full leather does make it look a little bit nicer. It is a little more presentable, but there's still a lot of plastic, whether it's the center console, depending on what options you get, you know, there's buttons and stuff, everything. There's a lot of plastic in the car. Now, it comes from a time when automakers did not hide plastic as well as they do now. There's a lot of accents that they add over the plastic, whether it's something that makes it look metallic, whether it's something that gives it a shiny finish. And these things help hide that it's actually just plastic. It's similar to your child's toy in a lot of ways. But when the 996 first came out, you got to remember some of the cars that they're also going against. You look at the Ferrari F355, and yes, there's lots of leather in there. Yes, it is a very nice place to be, but there's also a lot of plastic in the center console. And it was just a time where even Ferrari didn't hide a lot of their plastic, and the plastic on the Ferrari has a tendency to, melt. The good thing about the 996, and same can be said as the 986 Boxster, but the 996 911, the interior quality, while it doesn't look great, it does tend to hold up pretty well. You know, some things like hinges and stuff can have issues, but if you're not hard on the car and you do take care of it, it actually can hold up very well. When I had my 986 Boxster, the interior actually didn't look very worn other than a couple things on side bolsters and stuff. I had that from 68,000 miles and I sold it just under 100,000 miles. The wear and tear wasn't bad on that car. And the same can be said of this 911. While there are some wear and tear items inside, mainly on the seats, mostly the interior actually has held up very well, and it doesn't look like a car that has almost 100,000 miles on it. But the great thing is when you're driving down the street, no one can see that there's a lot of plastic in your interior, and the driving experience is so good that you don't really pay that much attention to it. You kind of get used to it. But it is one thing, if you go up to a 997 or get one with the full leather interior, you will have a little bit less plastic. And even the 997, 991, they still have a lot of plastic in them, but like I said, they just hide it better and the interior looks nicer. So those are the cons of owning an early 996, but let's get to the positive stuff finally. Let's get to the pros. These are the reasons why you should buy an early 996 Porsche 911. Pro number 1, the dual row IMS bearing. The earliest cars, model year 1998 and model year 1999, had a dual row IMS bearing. This was much stronger than the later single row bearing that was in the other 996 cars, the 996.2 cars, some of the 2001 cars. So for 1999, and if you're in another country, also 1998, all the cars were fitted with a dual row IMS bearing. A lot of cars in 2000 also had dual row bearings, and some 2001s did. It's just kind of hit and miss at that point. But the 3.4 liter engines, a lot of them do have the dual row bearing. But if you get to 1998 or 1999 in the United States, you only have the 99 to choose from. You do get a dual row bearing unless something happened like the engine got replaced, which did happen occasionally. Then you might have a single row, but you're not as likely to make it as many miles. Then you might have a single row. You won't know for sure unless you drop the transmission, depending on if it's a Tiptronic or a manual car. If you replace the clutch in the manual car, then you'll be able to see, is this a dual row bearing when you actually drop the transmission with the Tiptronic, no clutch. As I said, the dual row bearing has a very low rate of failure. In fact, the rate of failure is similar to when Porsche redesigned the bearing for the 997.1 and 987 came in Boxster. For those .1s, while they still had an IMS bearing, they redesigned the bearing to be a single row bearing, but to have a much higher load capacity. The capacity is similar to the dual row bearing, and because of that, the dual row bearing is as strong, has a slow rate of failure as the later single row bearings that were an internal bearing. Of course, as with anything, any bearing can fail. You know, any car with an IMS bearing could have an IMS bearing failure. You're just lowering your chances of that happening. And there are ways to still replace this with, say, an IMS solution where it's an oil-fed IMS solution so that you're never having to replace the bearing again. And here's pro number 2, the cable-driven throttle body. Now, the earliest cars, 1998 and 99, had a cable-driven throttle body. These were the last 911s to have that. Similar years with the Boxster, up to 99 was the last year where it had a cable-driven throttle body. What this gives you is a direct feel of the cable being attached to the throttle. You also get the advantage of a cable-driven front trunk, some people call it a boot, or the rear hood, or boot, or trunk, where the engine is in a 911. In later cars, if your battery dies because they're not cable driven, you won't be able to open up your front trunk or frunk to get to the battery. So you have to either find a cable that's just hidden underneath to pull it, or you have to basically jump. There's jump spots on your fuse box where you jump that, and then that lets you release it's kind of crazy. But that's what you have to do in a lot of the newer ones because it's all electric. So the cable-driven throttle body gives you kind of that old school feel. The e-gas is great, don't get me wrong. The newer cars have e-gas, which is their electronic, drive-by-wire. And there's a lot of things that are nice about that as far as you can reprogram the computer and stuff to get you more feel. But the cable-driven throttle body gives you a little bit more old school feel. And as these are still kind of vintage cars, it gives you a little more of that vintage feeling. It's not going to give you that air-cooled feeling, but it's pretty close in a water-cooled package. And here's pro number 3, the price. You just cannot beat the price that these are going for. I bought my Porsche 911 Carrera Coupe with less than 100,000 miles, although close to 100,000, but less than 100,000 miles on it, and a clean title. Good Carfax. It looks like there's a good service history so far. I haven't found any major issues with the car. And there's a video right here if you want to see all the things that are wrong with it. I bought this car for just $12,500 for a 911. I mean, yes, some people hate the 996, although I think the hate is going away. Magnus Walker has 2 of them now that I know of. He might have more. You know, a lot of YouTubers like Hoovie's Garage has had a lot of 996s. And just the fact that more videos are being made about it, more people are talking about the 996 because they are such a bargain for what you get for the car. And most of their fatal flaws you can fix for not too much money, especially when you consider the fact of the low prices. So yes, I bought the cheapest 911 Carrera Coupe in the United States with under 100,000 miles and a clean title based on Auto Tempest search. But even at that, I've seen so many cars going for about $15,000 with fairly low miles. I mean, 80,000 to 100,000 miles, right in that range. Not too bad. Most of those will have a Tiptronic transmission in it, like this car does. The most valuable cars, if you're looking for an early Porsche 996 and you want the one that's going to cost you the most, it's going to be the most valuable, is going to be a little bit lower mileage coupe with a 6-speed manual. If you go for the Tiptronic, you still get the coupe and pay for less. Or you can pay less and get a cabriolet. And with the cabriolet, you can get the 6-speed manual. I actually almost bought a couple of cabriolets. It just didn't end up working out, whether it was negotiating on the price, they didn't want to come down, they were priced a little high. Some people are trying to get about $23, $25 for some of these cabriolets that have 50, 60,000 miles on it, which isn't bad, but it is a little on the higher end, especially when it's a cab. And that's usually because these are being sold by dealers and they're like, hey, I got a Porsche. It must be worth a small Ford. So they're charging over things like Kelley Blue Book and a lot of what the price guides say things should be. But even a coupe with a 6-speed, I've even seen them with the Aero kit, which makes it look like the early 911 GT3, a factory aero kit car with fairly low miles. I've seen those go for just $25,000. So on the top end of an early 996, you're only looking at about $25,000. Not quite to 30, you might get a little over 25. I don't think 30, most of the time it's probably not worth it unless it's a real time capsule. And if it's a real time capsule, don't drive it, keep it in your garage. It's going to lose value as soon as you drive it. And I would be very, very concerned about the engine blowing as soon as I did drive it because there hasn't been lubrication going through it. But 25,000 is pretty much the top end for an early 996 with a very good car going for about 20 and plenty decent examples for about $16,000 in the United States. And that's a lot of car for $16,000. This car here, when I went to the dealer, was originally being asked $16,000 for it, and then different negotiation got it down to 14 or 14.5. And then I got it down further, down to 12.5, bunch of negotiation. I have that whole video and you can watch that right here. That explains exactly how I got that price down. It is kind of a long video, so sorry about that. But yeah, you just can't find very many performance cars that originally cost, now get this, in 1999, a 911 coupe with the Tiptronic transmission and a couple other options like this car would have been about $70,000. In today's money, that's well over 100,000. I believe it's like 110,000 with inflation. There aren't many cars you can buy for 12,000, maybe 20,000, right in that range, depending on mileage and condition and options. There aren't many cars that you can find that give you this kind of performance and was a top tier luxury sports car in its day for the price. It's just hard to match it. I mean, you might be able to buy something like a C5 Corvette for similar price and you'll get similar performance. But when you tell someone you have a Corvette, people are like, oh, that's cool. If you tell someone you have a 911, people are like, whoa, how much are you making? You don't want to look like you're showing off. You need to tell them how much you paid because some people will think you paid a lot more. People will be paying more. I know a lot of people that pay more for their truck that, people are like, oh yeah, that's great. You got a Ford truck. Like 56 trucks are so expensive now, by the way. I don't understand it, but I'm not a truck guy. But pay crazy amounts of money, $50,000 for their truck, and then here I am driving this $12,000 old Porsche 911, and people are like, whoa, you must have spent like $60,000, $70,000 on that car. Even though it's older, they think they're still worth crazy amounts of money. And that's because most people don't realize how much depreciation actually happens. And that's the great thing, is this is a lot of car for the money. It's great value for the money. Just make sure you buy a good one, because if you don't, if you find one that isn't well maintained and you end up with a bunch of issues, yes, it didn't cost you a lot to pay for it, but it is going to cost you a lot in repairs. Repair bills will start to add up because parts prices are not cheaper than they used to be. I mean, to a degree, there's some aftermarket stuff, so you might be able to get a little bit less on parts, but parts and labor, if you don't do it yourself, and you can do a lot yourself, but if you don't do it yourself, parts and labor are going to be a little bit more on a 911. So the great thing is, if you can afford something like a brand new Cayman and you're thinking paying, say, $50,000 for a car, $55,000 I believe is roughly the starting of a 718 Cayman, but instead you bought a 996 Porsche 911, even if repairs happen, yes, the value of the car, you're going to end up putting more in it than the car's worth, at least now, because you never know, these values could go up. But you still could mathematically come out ahead, because that Cayman is going to keep losing value. And even though you're not putting money into it, you might end up still spending less to make a 911 perfect that is of this vintage. Now, the Cayman, the newer Cayman's going to have better performance because it's newer and more luxury elements and things like that. So it depends on what you want. If you want more of a vintage feel, then the 996 generation 911 is going to be the better car. Otherwise, I would go with the Cayman. Anyways, got totally off topic there. Woo, tangent. So the early Porsche 996, it isn't the most loved 911. In fact, right now it might be the most hated. And it isn't the fastest 911 ever made, but it is just an incredible bargain for what is a fantastic car. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they probably haven't driven one. So thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. That really helps us. The YouTube algorithm really likes it when you give us thumbs up, and then more people will see our videos, and potentially we could get better videos. Maybe we could get someone who could actually speak in front of the camera instead of me. But give it a big thumbs up if you liked it. And if you didn't like it, you know, there's a lot of other videos on the internet. So you can go watch one of those and just forget about that thumbs down button, but you can go do you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I mean, now you've made it to the end of another video. Perhaps you've watched more of these videos, but you've made it to the end of this video. So you either enjoyed it, at least a little bit, or you're just a glutton for punishment. So if you subscribe now, remember, a donation will be made in your name to the Buy a Middle-Aged Man Porsche 918 Spider Fund. His name's David, and that car will be in my garage, parked next to the cheapest Porsche 911 Carrera coupe in the United States. As always, if you're a regular viewer, thanks so much. You really do make this possible and fun. Now get out there and drive, at least if that's allowed where you are. I know more of America is opening up, and hopefully everyone's still staying safe, but yeah, get out there, enjoy the sun, and drive. The YouTube algorithm, say that a bunch of times, right?